So, hello, good morning to you, Stephen.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Good morning to you too.
Thank you so much for coming on to our podcast, Straight from the Horse's Mouth, where we thought it was a really apt name to be able to speak to people who've been affected by drink spiking and other spiking related crimes, so that we can, as it says on the tin, get it straight from the horse's mouth, so we can find out exactly how spiking is really, well, it's like an epidemic, really, isn't it? It's
Yep.
been going on undetected for years. Personally, I've been campaigning for nearly 2 decades now, because somebody tried to spike my drink many, many moons ago when I was traveling around the world. And, and there just seems to be these preconceived ideas that it happens just to students, and it happens from 18 to 24-year-olds, mainly female. And it's
Yep.
like, no, it doesn't. Maybe they're just the ones that are stepping forward and saying it happens to them. But
Exactly.
yeah, what I'd like to do, Stephen, is I'm going to shut up and I'm going to pass over to you. And if you could just explain to us the circumstances. And, I didn't want to know before this podcast, because I always like to feel what the guest is saying to me, so my answers will be as I automatically feel them. So I'm just going to sit back for a minute now, Stephen, and pass over to you, and if you could please explain exactly what happened to us.
Thanks very much, Dawn. So it was October 2006, and it's amazing how clear that part of the night is in my head. I went out for a drink with a friend, and I just split up with my long-term partner, and I was kind of hoping for a bit of TLC and, a bit of a shoulder to cry on. But my friend arrived, Dawn, and he was having an argument with his girlfriend on the phone. So he kind of entered the pub arguing with her, and then this kind of carried on throughout our hour or so together. And he kept coming in the pub and going out of the pub to speak to her. And on the third time that he left, Dawn, I ordered another drink, our second drink. And when he came back in, he said, "Stephen, I can't stay. I've got to go." And his girlfriend was packing her bags at this time. He said, I can't stay. What are you going to do?" And I remember being a bit miffed, to be honest, thinking, oh, well, so much for getting a shoulder to cry on. And I looked at the two drinks in front of me. I looked at the bar. I looked at the clock on the wall. It said 10 o'clock. And I just thought, I'm just going to finish these two drinks and then I'll go home. And he left. And what happened next is always kind of quite hazy in certain ways, but then I remember some things very clearly. I remember my head feeling very, very heavy. And I felt like the only way I can describe it is like somebody put a big breeze block on the back of my head. So basically my head was downwards. So all I could do was look down and see my shoes. I was sitting on a bar stool. All I could look down and see my boots. And but I do remember seeing a guy's shoes standing in between mine, the smell of cheap aftershave, and a guy's voice saying to me, "Do you need some fresh air, mate?" I felt sick. I felt dizzy. I felt, I just felt awful. So, of course, I was like, yeah, I thought some nice guy is offering to help me. And I felt as if I closed my eyes for a split second. And it really did feel like a split second. And I felt as if I opened them again. Well, I did open them again, and I was kind of blinded by sunlight shining through the window in my flat. And I couldn't understand it because I'd looked at the clock in the pub, and it said 10 p.m. And I looked at my clock on my bedside table, and it said 10:02. And my brain, again, so hard to, after you've been drugged, so hard to be able to string things together. And all of a sudden I did realize that it was 10:02 the following day. So I went to stand up, Joe, because, Dawn, because I thought what I need to do is get up, have a shower, and go and get ready for work. But when I went to stand up, my legs completely gave way. I couldn't put any weight on them at all. And I was really scared. And I was shivering. I was nauseous. All those things were still going on. And what I did was dragged myself along the hallway to the bathroom. And by the time I got to the bathroom, by holding onto the bathroom door and the towel rail in the bathroom, I could just stand myself up. And I thought, right, Stephen, get the shower on, get yourself, in the shower. That'll make you feel better. So I started to get undressed, and I kicked off my shoes and I undid my jeans, and my jeans fell to the floor, and I saw that they were covered in blood. I saw that my underwear was covered in blood and the backs of my legs were covered in blood. And I remember just collapsing onto the floor, going, no, God, how can this have happened? And if this would have happened to me, I should be able to remember. And why can't I remember? And all these things were whizzing through my mind. And I know what they say. I've watched enough of these crime dramas, don't wash away evidence. But I felt like my skin was on fire. And I felt like if I didn't get into the shower, that I was just going to burst into flames. And that's what I did. I got into the shower and I scrubbed away my skin. And I always say to people that it is like you see it in the movies, that you scrub away your skin until it bleeds. After 45 minutes, I got out of the shower, called the hospital, because I didn't know what to do. So I thought I'll phone the hospital and ask them. They sent an ambulance. They sent a police car. They came and took my clothes for evidence. They dusted the flat. They took me away. They took me to the hospital, started doing blood tests and all these kind of different things. And I kind of felt as if I was above myself looking down, because I was still kind of a bit drugged. I was still a bit hazy of everything. But then I remembered, Dawn, a doctor walking through the door, and he said to me, Stephen, from the blood work we have done, we can tell that you have Rohypnol in your blood. Now, obviously, Rohypnol was the date rape drug at the time. And then he said, from the physical evidence, we can tell you've been raped. And like you said, when we started, rape was always something that, for me, that I read about in the newspaper, and that happened to somebody else. It didn't happen to people like me.
Yeah.
That was this crazy thought that I had, and to add insult to injury, there was a really nice nurse, and she said to me, Stephen, all your blood tests have come back clear for any STIs, but you must, for sexually transmitted infections, but you must come back within 3 months to have a second HIV test done. And I didn't. I left there and I did anything I could possibly do to forget what I couldn't remember, if that makes any sense, and I turned to drink and drugs, just to try and help me block out, these thoughts. And then eventually 6 months later, I thought, Stephen, you need to start dealing with what has happened to you. And I decided to go back to the hospital to have my second HIV test, and I tested positive for HIV.
Oh my God.
So the person that had raped me had HIV. So yeah, it was, I kind of felt the worst had happened, and then that happened as well. So I didn't think that 17 years later I would be here talking to you. I thought at the time, I'd grown up in the years of Section 28 at school, and our sexual education was so minimal. It was unbelievable, and all I ever knew about HIV and AIDS was that Freddie Mercury and Rock Hudson and, all the people that died. So I thought that was it. So for the next 2 years, that's just what I waited for that to happen, you know. So it was really, really, really tough for a long time.
I am so sorry to hear that. I mean, this is the ultimate worst scenario that can ever happen from this disgusting crime. It really is. And how have you coped, Stephen?
I didn't cope really for 2 years, Donna. I didn't cope. I went to work, I paid the bills, I continued doing all those things that we have to do. But at nighttime, I would get home from work, I would put on some Whitney Houston and I would just cry. I would just, I would just break my heart and just think when and why and what did I do? And, there was so much blame on me. It was something that I'd done wrong, not something that somebody else had done wrong, so it took 2 years of being very, very, very sad. But I think there's only so long that you can wait to die. And luckily, I don't know what it was. I don't know. Just something made me want to live. I think that was the underlying thing, that despite what had happened to me, really deep down, I didn't want to die. I really wanted to live. And luckily my will to live was stronger than my will to die, and because of that, I started writing. I've been an actor for many years, so I was always used to stepping into somebody else's shoes and telling their stories. But I decided to write a one-man show and tell my own story. And that was amazingly cathartic and healing. And it amazed me, Dawn, how much that once I told my story, I was just flooded with other people's stories. It was unbelievable how many other people have contacted me and said, Stephen, I know exactly what you have been through. I've been through it myself and I've never told anybody. And, so it kind of, in a strange kind of way, Dawn, it kind of made what had happened to me have a reason, if
Yeah.
that makes sense, and I stopped blaming myself as well. It took all these things took time, but I stopped blaming myself. I realized one day that it wasn't me. It wasn't anything that I was wearing or anything that I said or anything. It was just somebody sitting, a guy sitting behind me who had seen our drinks sitting. My friend and I were sitting opposite each other, and the bar was running down the side of us, and my drink was sitting at the bar beside me, and he'd obviously taken advantage of that. So it was nothing to do with me. And I think a lot of people that have been raped blame themselves, for so long. And letting go of that was an amazingly, it was amazingly good for me. And I took my show to New York and hoped I would get a month over there, and my show ran for 9 months and closed off Broadway.
No. Oh
Yeah.
my God, Stephen, that's amazing. That's nearly made me cry.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just unbelievable, and just the outpouring of other people's stories just made me think, this is doing something. There's a reason
Yeah.
behind all of this, so I hope I've been able to flip the script and and just say, no, this is how it was, but I've tried to make something, you know something good come from something bad.
You've taken a positive out of a very, very disgusting, it must be so traumatic, such a
Mhm.
traumatic experience for you, Stephen. And to hear you talk about it, it's made me feel like every time I speak to victims of this crime, everyone's got a different story, a different account of how this has happened to them. And for me to then end up being HIV positive after someone's done that to you. And, you know, did they know that before they'd done that to you? Did they? It's just all those awful questions that must have gone through your mind so many times.
Yep.
And yeah. And can I just go back when you said, I mean, this is not just you saying this to me, it's practically nearly every victim I've ever spoken to that blame themselves.
Yeah.
Could you just try and explain that to the listeners today of why you think that victims of this crime blame themselves?
I suppose in some way it's a kind of stereotype. It's a horrible stereotype, you know, that maybe I had in my head, that people like me don't get raped. This only happens to other people, you know, and because of that, for the 2 years that I was just waiting to die, I looked for a reason. Why did it happen to me? You know, you automatically ask those questions. Why me? And when you don't, when you can't see the person that raped you's face, when you can't remember, I only have very, very flickered memories of him, of the weight of him and things like all those kind of things are very fleeting, you know. Nothing felt secure in my head, so I was looking for somebody to blame, I suppose. And when you can't see somebody to blame, you know, you start blaming yourself.
Oh,
Yep.
that's
You know,
a really good explanation, actually, because there is, who do you blame when somebody has come in and basically poisoned you,
yep,
taken advantage of you? And Stephen, for me, for the victims that I've spoken to, the only thing that it keeps coming back to every time for me is just, it's got to be just ultimately somebody overpowering you.
yep,
It, because, you know, I just can't understand, well, obviously, why would somebody want to have sex with somebody that was incoherent, that had probably, you know, was in a terrible state, that you know, that you're not really present, are you?
exactly.
You're going from what I've understand, you go in and out of consciousness.
Yeah.
You're left with no memory whatsoever of what happened to you. So they found out that Rohypnol was in your system.
Yeah.
So what happened from there on? Did you ever gain a conviction?
Never. I never got a conviction, and that was difficult to deal with as well, because that was something else I blamed myself for a certain amount of time as well, because I did wash away any evidence that there was. I washed it down the drain, you know, and that was hard to deal with. But the whole interaction between the police was difficult as well, you know, because Dawn, I remember the 2 police officers came to the house, and I said, I think I've been raped. And I remember there was a younger police officer there, and he looked, and he kind of looked at me, and he furrowed his brow when I said it, and he went, "But you're a guy." And you could see that that he couldn't understand that men can get raped. You know, it was like, and because he kind of made me think, oh, it wasn't rape, then I didn't call it rape for the next 2 years. I just said something happened to me. And that was because it shows how important language is, you know.
Doesn't it?
You know, and I know certain people don't like the word victim, but I was a victim for 2 years. Dawn, I was a victim because I just wanted to die because of what had happened to me. I'm now a survivor because I've come through it, you know, and I love that word because I'm very proud of being a survivor, because being a victim was hard, you know. So yeah, language and the way that, officials deal with it is also very important.
So the police, when you've just explained how that was dealt with at your flat, then were you taken to like a sexual assault referral centre or to the hospital? What was the next step, Stephen?
So next step was hospital. And once the hospital had done all the checks for me, then I was passed over to speak to the police. And the police just kept asking me, what can you tell us? And I kept saying, I can't tell you anything.
Same.
I can't, I can tell you the smell of the aftershave. I can tell you the shoes he was wearing, and I can tell you what his voice sounded like. But visually, they needed visuals. They needed, how tall was he? How short was he? What, all these kind of things. What color skin? All these kind of things. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And that in a way made me feel even more helpless, because I couldn't see anything. And they talked about, was I, there's a possibility of me blocking it out. But then also with Rohypnol, with what I found out about Rohypnol, is it does block out those memories. It isn't a conscious thing. The memories were gone and they have never come back, and it's 17 years later. So my dealing with the police was tough for me, because I felt like a victim again. I felt like I'd done something wrong, and why had I left, why hadn't I, because they said to me, why didn't you, why were you not looking at your drink, or why was your drink not in front of you, and all these kind of things. So again, all these things I took on as something that I'd done wrong. Yep. So it was, my interaction with the police wasn't great. And eventually they were like, we don't know what more we can do. We've done everything we can do. And to be honest, I said to them, Don, I was like, well, look, thank you, but I'm fine. Let's just leave it. Because I couldn't cope with any more of feeling the way I did when I was with them.
That's dreadful. And this isn't the first time I've heard this, Stephen, I can assure you. And we believe it's lack of education.
Yeah.
Personally, we've looked into the signs, the symptoms, an immediate call to action. And this is not just for the emergency services either. This is for bars. This is for street pastors. This is for taxi drivers. Those are like our fourth emergency service, as I like to call them. They're the ones that are there front facing what's happening. Yep. And they could be the difference between somebody getting home safely or potentially gang raped.
Yeah.
It is that much of a fine line. And
it is.
And if that bartender had been on a course and understood what somebody acted like, and they'd seen you have one drink, and then you were probably led out of that pub.
Yep.
You wouldn't have been able to walk properly.
No.
All your inhibitions go. You can't walk correctly. You got blurred vision.
Yeah.
You could possibly have wet yourself, could have been violently sick, because that's what these drugs do. If somebody had been on a course and that barman had thought, well, hold on a minute, he was in here with his friend. His friend's had a row with his girlfriend's, been in and out and in and out. Why is he suddenly paralytic and a stranger's, that could have been stopped so easily.
Yeah. And I literally do not remember. I remember nothing from after I said, yes, please, to this guy when he offered me help. I remember nothing. And when I said yes, I was sitting in the bar. And that's the last thing I remember. So yeah, as you say, if one person, if somebody, walking past you had noticed or something, then it can make all the difference.
Well, I'm so proud of you for what you've done, for what you've achieved. And thank goodness you didn't let, as I'd like to say, the bastards grind you down. because how easily could you have just given up?
Yeah.
You know, and what have you done? You've been to Broadway. You've been over and you've hit New York, and you've done a play, and you've explained. So when you were saying to me that so many other people had come forward to you, is this people who'd also been spiked?
Yeah, so a lot of people who had been spiked. I opened up an email account for my show, Dawn, just so that people could find out when it was next going to be on, just for inquiries. And that's what the email address was for. But suddenly I would get back to the apartment each night after doing the show, and there was one story and then another story and another story, and not all of them were about being spiked, but a lot of them were about rape. A lot of them were just other people telling me their stories, because my story also talked about being an adopted child, having an adopted mother who lived with schizophrenia. So my childhood was pretty hectic, to start with. So there were a lot of different things that people could connect with, but had never told anybody or had never shared with anybody. So it was, it was an amazing. It really made me realize the power of our stories are the most amazing. It's our stories are so important, and that's why I always used to say to people at the end of my show, our stories matter. However you tell them, whether you're up on stage or whether you're just telling your best friend, they matter.
They really do. And that's such a lovely thing to say. And I just really want to, like, I'm planning on doing, I always do something big and bold, Stephen. And we made, when I first started trying to warn people on spiking, I designed these stop tops to go on top of a drink to stop an opportunist from being able to slip something into your drink. And then I designed training courses, because I thought, right, quickly, a quick fix is to get a top to stop an opportunist. So that was one quick fix sort of done. My next thing was education is key. So we made a public awareness video, and we went out for months and months, going into a nightclub, trying to film someone putting something in a drink. And anyway, it took us quite a while. We worked with Exeter College and we designed a public awareness video. So I boldly stated, I would like 1 million people to watch my video. And I think we're just under 500,000 right now. So we're not doing too bad on that. And now my next bold statement, which I'm going to release this week, is that I now want to undertake the largest and most comprehensive spiking awareness research study. So, and it's going to be called Following the Victim's Journey.
Yep.
So, and this for me is what it's all about, because so many people I've spoken to, they got spiked, nobody intervened. So we'll just talk about your experience, Stephen. You got spiked in the bar, nobody intervened, probably no one had any training. You weren't aware of what was happening. That man was able to take you from a safe space and get you home, and nobody intervened on the way home. Nobody questioned. So that was either a taxi journey or a train journey, or whatever it may have been. So there, you've been let down there again. Then when you're talking about the police, so you've got the interaction with the police, and they say, well, can men be raped? I mean, what sort of question is that? And and for something as traumatic as what you've just been through, to be asked that, for me, is just dreadful. But anyway, that's maybe just incompetence. But so then we go to the hospital. So at the hospital, they have now confirmed, and to be honest with you, maybe because you were sexually assaulted, that they actually done a test, because so many victims I speak to, they don't even test them. So they don't ever know what drug that they were drugged with. Right. And for your own peace of mind and your mental health, surely that should be something that is just done, naturally. So that's another thing. So after all this happened to you, one thing I haven't asked you, did anybody say, do you need any help, Stephen? Do you want to speak to us? Did they offer you to talk to victim support? Did your doctor help you? Did anybody help you?
I think for me, Dawn, I was very ashamed. I was very, very ashamed of, one, me, a man, being raped, and two, that I had HIV. And I didn't, I think the help was out there, but I needed to look for it myself. You know, it wasn't as if somebody said, here's a leaflet, here's a phone number. There was none of that. But to be honest, on I couldn't, I didn't want, it wasn't that I didn't want the help. I just couldn't cope with that. I just couldn't, because every time I thought, if I have to talk about this, then I have to deal with what happened to me. And if I have to share my story, or if I have to try and remember, then I have to, you know, and all I wanted to do was to forget. You know, I always describe it, you know, as forget the memories that I couldn't remember.
Brilliant.
You
That
know,
is such a brilliant title. I think that's what we're going to call this podcast, to
yeah,
be honest.
yeah, because it was just like, you know, and but to try and get somebody to understand what that, how that actually works, you know, to forget the memories that you can't remember, because people are like, what, that doesn't make sense. And I'm like, I know it doesn't make sense, but to me, you know, but to me it makes perfect sense, because it was, yeah. So I didn't dip into any support at all for the first 2 years at all. Don't, you know, there was nothing, there in front of me. I don't remember there being anything there, you know, on offer. So no.
Okay. So for anyone who's listening today, if this crime has affected you, I would just like to say that there are a few options. If you didn't want to report this to the police, you can speak to victim support. They will not make you report this to the police. And also, if you feel like you've been out and somebody has sexually assaulted or raped you, you can always go directly to a sexual assault referral centre. They again will not make you report this to the police, but they can keep your samples for up to 2 years, I believe it is, for you to be able to make your mind up. So I think today, Stephen, what's really important for me is when you said that you saw blood in your jeans, in your underwear, down the back of your legs. Now, that must have been dreadful. The first thing that anybody would naturally want to do is to go for a wash. That's just a natural, instant reaction feeling.
Yeah.
But obviously now, you know, you've just lost all that evidence and probably the main part of you being able to get a conviction. Now, in that same breath, like I just said about the sexual assault referral centres, they are on offer to people that do not want to go to the police. I mean, luckily you were brave and you did go to the police. And how brave are you now to share your experience to help others? So personally, I'd like to thank you so much for being so brave and for stepping out. Look, not many men, I've spoken to hundreds of men over the years who broken down in my arms and pleaded with me never to tell anyone, because they'd never want their wife or their girlfriend to find out. They'd never want their children to find out. So I know how difficult it is for you to step up to this and to you know, and to go public with it. So is there any messages out there that you could share, not just to other men, to men and women, if this happens to you? What message would you give to those people today, Stephen?
I think the most important message is, it's not your fault. You know, the simple fact is that nobody has the right to force you into sex, you know, and if somebody has drugged you, then they are taking away your ability to say no, and that is wrong. And if you feel that that has happened to you, if you know that that has happened to you, then you know, it's okay to tell somebody. It's, you know, it doesn't have to be a secret. It doesn't have to be something that you blame yourself for, because this is somebody else's issue that they have kind of pushed onto you. So don't take it as something that you have done wrong. You know, and I suppose another thing, Dawn, is that, you know, I've been lucky. I've got through it, and I am 17 years later living a healthy life with HIV. You know, I've been so lucky that there's been so many advances in treatment. You know, I don't even, you know, the HIV is so small. The amount of it in my body is so small now. It's kept under control so well, you know, that I can't pass it on, and all these kind of things. So life does go on, you know, but it's just that journey to get from there to now. It takes time, but you know, it's just about remembering that it's not down to you. It's not down to something that you did wrong. It's down to something else somebody else did wrong.
And that is the perfect way for us to finish up today. Stephen Hart, thank you so much for being so brave and for sharing your experience to help others. And you heard it straight here, straight from the horse's mouth. As Stephen said, don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. It's not your fault. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you.